What would you do if you found your own face staring back at you from a missing children's website? In 2011, Steve Carter, a 35-year-old software salesman from Philadelphia, was casually browsing the internet when he stumbled upon something impossible. An age progression image of a missing baby, that looked exactly like him. Steve had always known he was adopted from a Hawaiian orphanage at age 4. He had a loving family, a successful career, and what seemed like a perfectly normal life. But on this ordinary Tuesday morning, while CNN played in the background, everything he believed about his identity was about to crumble. The story that caught his attention was about Carlina White, an Atlanta woman who discovered she'd been kidnapped as a baby by searching missing children databases. Something about her case nagged at Steve. On pure instinct, he typed 3 simple words into missingkids.com, Hawaii, missing, male. What appeared on his screen made his blood run cold. The age progression image wasn't just similar, it was him. I got chills, Steve later recalled. I was like, holy crap, it's me. But here's what Steve didn't know. The face staring back at him belonged to a baby who vanished on June 21, 1977, 34 years ago. Steve Carter had never been missing. Or had he? The answer would uncover a mystery that began with a walk that never ended. To understand how Steve Carter ended up on that missing children's website, we need to go back to where it all began. Hawaii, 1977. A young father named Mark Barnes was about to live every parent's worst nightmare. Mark Barnes was just 25 years old, living in the small coastal town of Hauula on the island of Oahu. He worked hard, loved his 6-month-old son Mark's Panama, and was trying to build a life with his girlfriend, Charlotte Moriarty. By all accounts, Mark was a devoted father who doted on his baby boy. But Charlotte was different. Those close to the couple knew Charlotte had a restless spirit. She would disappear for days at a time without explanation, then return as if nothing had happened. Mark's family later described their relationship as tumultuous. Charlotte was unpredictable, a free spirit who couldn't be tied down. But she'd always come back. Until June 21, 1977. It was supposed to be a simple trip. Charlotte told Mark she was taking baby Marks to the grocery store. Just a routine errand on a Tuesday afternoon. Hours passed. Then a full day. Every parent watching this just felt their heart stop, because we all know that sinking feeling when someone should have been home hours ago. Mark started calling friends, checking hospitals, driving the routes Charlotte might have taken. Every hour that passed made the knot in his stomach tighter. This wasn't like her other disappearances. She had never taken the baby before. By day 3, Mark was frantic. He contacted the Honolulu Police Department, but their response was frustratingly familiar to anyone who's dealt with missing adult cases. She'll probably come back, they said. Adults have the right to leave. But Mark knew something was wrong. Charlotte might disappear, but she wouldn't take Mark's. Not for this long. Mark spent the next year and a half in what he later described as going crazy driving around the island. He searched beaches, questioned strangers, followed every lead. The police treated it as a domestic dispute gone wrong. Mark Barnes deserved better from the system, but in 1977, missing person cases involving adults were often dismissed too quickly. Then, 3 days after Charlotte and Mark's vanished, there was a breakthrough. Police received a call about a woman and baby found in suspicious circumstances. Mark's heart must have raced. Finally, answers. Finally, his son would come home. But what police found would make this case infinitely worse. The woman they discovered wasn't just hiding, she was lying. And those lies would tear a family apart for over 3 decades. If you're a parent, you know this fear. You know the terror Mark Barnes felt when his child didn't come home. Right now, thousands of families are living this nightmare. Subscribe to help us bring attention to families still searching. Your support literally helps solve cases. Because every story we tell, every case we cover, keeps hope alive for someone who needs it most. What happened next would prove that sometimes the people we trust most are capable of the ultimate betrayal. What police found 3 days later would expose a betrayal so calculated, so devastating, that it would rob a family of 34 years together. And it all started with 2 simple lies. On June 24, 1977, Honolulu police responded to reports of a woman and infant squatting in a stranger's home. When officers arrived, they found Charlotte Moriarty with baby Marks, but neither Mark Barnes nor the missing person report existed in their minds. Because Charlotte had given them completely false names. She told police her name was Jane Amia. Her son, she claimed, was Tenzin Amia. 2 lies that would change everything. But it gets worse. The baby police found wasn't just missing, he was malnourished and neglected. This wasn't a mother protecting her child. This was a woman who had put her 6-month-old son in danger. The system that should protect children was about to fail Marks in the most catastrophic way possible. Charlotte's lies weren't random, they were strategic. She told authorities that Tenzin's father was a native Hawaiian, knowing this would make it nearly impossible to trace the child's real identity. When you're looking for a Hawaiian father named Amia, you're not looking for Mark Barnes from Hauula. This wasn't mental illness, this was premeditated deception. Charlotte was taken to a psychiatric hospital for evaluation. Baby, Tenzin, was placed in protective care. And here's where the system failed Marks completely. No one cross-referenced the missing person report filed by Mark Barnes. No one questioned why this, Jane Amia, had no identification, no history, no trail. The bureaucracy that should have reunited this family instead buried them deeper. Then Charlotte delivered her final blow. After just a few days in psychiatric care, she vanished again. She walked out of that hospital and disappeared forever, leaving her son trapped in a system that didn't even know his real name. Mark's Panama Barnes became Tenzin Amia, and Tenzin Amia became a ward of the state. This is how the system failed Marks. One woman's lies created a bureaucratic maze that would take 34 years to solve. The baby was moved to an orphanage 30 miles away from where his father was desperately searching. Mark Barnes was looking for his son Marks. The state was caring for a child named Tenzin. They were the same person, but the system couldn't see it. Share this if you think the system failed Marks. Because this isn't just about one case, this is about how easily our institutions can lose a child in plain sight. This is why our true crime community matters. We don't let these stories get forgotten. We demand better. We hold systems accountable. Because somewhere out there, another Marks is waiting for someone to connect the dots. One lie would steal 34 years from a family, but it would also save a child's life. Because what happened to Marks next would give him something his biological family never could, a chance at a normal childhood. But the question remained, how do you solve a missing person case when the missing person doesn't know they're missing? Steve Carter stared at that age progression image for hours. The resemblance was undeniable, but the implications were impossible. How do you tell someone you think you might be a missing child from 1977? At first, Steve treated it like a curiosity. He showed the image to friends, expecting them to laugh it off. Instead, they were stunned into silence. "Dude, you need to call the police," one friend insisted. This isn't a coincidence. The people who knew Steve best could see what he was afraid to admit, this wasn't just a resemblance. This was him. This time, the system got it right. When Steve contacted the Honolulu Police Department in February 2011, they didn't dismiss him. They didn't tell him to wait and see. Detective took one look at the evidence and said, "We're going to figure this out." After 34 years of bureaucratic failure, someone was finally listening. But DNA testing in 2011 wasn't instant. Steve submitted his sample and then waited. Month 1 passed. Month 3. Month 6. For 8 excruciating months, Steve Carter lived in limbo, not knowing if he was Steve Carter from Philadelphia or Mark's Panama Barnes from Hawaii. The wait was torture, but it was also complicated. Steve loved his adoptive parents, Pat and Steve Carter. They had given him an incredible childhood, opportunities, love. Part of him hoped the DNA would come back negative. Because if he was Mark's Panama Barnes, what did that mean for the family who raised him? October 2011. The call came on a Tuesday morning. The DNA results were in. Steve Carter held his breath as the detective delivered news that would change everything. It's a match. You are Mark's Panama Moriarty Barnes. DNA doesn't lie. Science doesn't have emotions or bias. After 34 years, the truth finally surfaced. But the DNA results revealed something else that shattered Steve's heart. His biological father, Mark Barnes, had never stopped looking. For over 3 decades, Mark had held on to hope that someday, somehow, his son would come home. I always expected a knock at the door or a phone call, Mark later said. Justice for Mark's Panama Barnes had finally arrived, but it came with a devastating cost: 34 years of lost time, missed birthdays, bedtime stories never read, father-son moments that could never be recovered. Steve waited 8 months for answers. Some families wait decades. Right now, thousands of parents are living in that same limbo, wondering if their child is alive, wondering if they'll ever get that phone call. Hit subscribe to help us keep these stories alive until every family gets their answers. Because your engagement literally helps solve cases. Steve Carter now knew who he really was. But the hardest part was still ahead. How do you call a father who's been grieving your loss for 34 years and tell him you're alive? The phone call that followed would prove that some bonds can survive even the cruelest separations. Steve Carter now had scientific proof of who he was, but DNA results are just numbers on a page. The real test would come when he picked up the phone to call a father who had been mourning his son for 34 years. But first, you need to know about Jennifer Munheimer. She was only 8 years old when her baby brother Marks disappeared, but she never forgot him. While the rest of the world moved on, Jennifer carried the memory of a 6-month-old baby who used to giggle when she made funny faces. She was the hero who refused to let Marks become just another cold case. In 2001, Jennifer did something extraordinary. She contacted the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and demanded they reopen her brother's case. She pushed for that age progression image to be created and posted online. For 10 years, she fought bureaucracy, pushed investigators, and kept Marks's story alive. Jennifer Munheimer never gave up. Be like Jennifer. October 2011. Steve Carter dialed his biological father's number with shaking hands. When Mark Barnes answered, Steve's voice cracked. "Hi, this is going to sound crazy, but I think I might be your son." The silence on the other end lasted forever. Then Mark Barnes, who had waited 34 years for this moment, whispered, "Marks." All I could say was, "Wow. Oh wow. Wow," Steve later recalled. Every human craves connection, and in that moment, 2 souls separated by decades of lies finally found each other. The conversations that followed revealed something beautiful. Steve and Jennifer shared the same sense of humor, the same mannerisms, the same way of looking at the world. Blood really is thicker than water. Jennifer had spent 34 years wondering what her baby brother would be like as a man. Now she knew, he was exactly who she'd hoped he'd be. But time is the cruelest thief of all. Mark Barnes, who had never stopped believing his son was alive, who had waited over 3 decades for that phone call, died in 2023. He and Steve spoke regularly for 12 years, but they never met in person. The father who searched every beach in Hawaii for his missing son passed away before he could hold Marks in his arms again. Think about what was stolen from this family. 34 years of birthdays, holidays, graduations, life milestones. Mark Barnes missed watching his son take his first steps, say his first words, graduate high school, get married. Jennifer missed growing up with her little brother. Steve missed having a biological father at his wedding. Jennifer fought for 10 years to get this case reopened. This is what persistence looks like. This is what love looks like. This is why our true crime community matters. We don't let these stories get forgotten. We demand better. Jennifer never stopped fighting for her brother. If this story touches you, subscribe and help us fight for other families still searching. Your engagement literally saves lives. Because every view, every share, every comment keeps hope alive for someone who needs it most. Steve Carter had found his father and sister, but one family member remained a ghost. The woman who started it all, Charlotte Moriarty, had vanished without a trace. And her disappearance would prove to be the most haunting mystery of all. Don't wait to reconnect with family. Because sometimes, by the time the truth comes out, it's already too late. Steve Carter had found his father and sister, but the woman at the center of this entire mystery, the one person who could answer every question, had become something far more elusive than missing. Charlotte Moriarty had become a ghost. After walking out of that psychiatric hospital in 1977, Charlotte Moriarty didn't just disappear, she evaporated. No social security records. No employment history. No death certificate. No arrests. For 45 years and counting, there has been absolutely no trace of the woman who tore a family apart with 2 simple lies. Charlotte Moriarty became a ghost in an age before the internet, before surveillance cameras on every corner, before digital footprints. She vanished so completely that it defies logic. How does someone disappear so thoroughly in modern America? Where is Charlotte Moriarty today? But Steve's response will surprise you. When asked about the woman who stole 34 years from his biological family, Steve Carter doesn't express anger. He doesn't demand justice. Instead, he shows a level of grace that's almost impossible to comprehend. If you're not in the right headspace, Steve explains, you might put the oxygen mask on yourself first. He sees Charlotte not as a villain, but as a troubled woman who made desperate choices during a mental health crisis. Steve has his own theory about what happened to Charlotte. He believes she fled to East Asia, possibly getting caught up in that lifestyle, the transient, off-the-grid existence that was easier to maintain in the late 1970s. It's a theory born not from evidence, but from compassion. Letters from family members revealed more about Charlotte's struggles. Her relationship with Mark Barnes was volatile. She battled demons that 1970s mental health care couldn't address. Steve learned that his mother wasn't evil, she was broken. I don't blame her for anything, Steve says with remarkable peace. Could you forgive like Steve did? Could you show grace to someone who cost you 34 years with your biological family? Steve Carter chose healing over hatred, understanding over anger. This is what makes this case so haunting. Charlotte Moriarty isn't a clear-cut villain. She's a woman who made terrible choices during a mental health crisis, and those choices rippled through decades. But her son, the baby she took, chose forgiveness. Our community doesn't just seek justice, we seek understanding. Steve shows us what healing looks like. Sometimes the most powerful response to injustice isn't revenge, it's grace. But Charlotte's story remains unfinished. Somewhere out there, a 70-something woman might not even know that her son became a missing child, found himself, and forgave her. Help us find Charlotte Moriarty. Share this story. Because even ghosts deserve the chance to come home. Steve Carter had solved the mystery of his own identity, but his story was about to become something bigger. Something that would give hope to thousands of families still searching in the dark. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing about solving one mystery is how it helps solve others. Steve Carter's story didn't end with finding his family. It was just the beginning. Because sometimes, when you solve your own mystery, you become the key to solving others. When Steve's story hit the news in 2011, it exploded across social media. Here was proof that the impossible could happen, that missing children could grow up, live full lives, and find their way home decades later. Suddenly, families who had given up hope were picking up the phone again. Steve tells the story of riding a bus when a woman recognized him from the news. She approached him with tears in her eyes. "My son has been missing for 22 years, she whispered. "I thought he was dead. But seeing your story, maybe there's still hope." Steve looked into her eyes and said the words every grieving parent needs to hear: "There is a chance that person is doing well and will surface again." Steve's case proved that technology could solve mysteries that stumped investigators for decades. Age progression imaging, DNA databases, missing children websites, tools that didn't exist when Marks disappeared in 1977 were the very tools that brought him home in 2011. Miracles do happen, but sometimes they need a little help from science. Let's be honest about the odds. Cases like Steve's are incredibly rare. Most missing children don't find themselves on websites 34 years later. Most families don't get that phone call. But Steve Carter's story proves that, incredibly rare, doesn't mean impossible. And for families still searching, impossible is all the hope they need. Remember how this started? A man casually browsing a missing children's website, finding his own face staring back at him. That moment of shock, that impossible discovery, it changed everything. Not just for Steve, not just for Mark Barnes and Jennifer, but for every family who heard this story and thought, maybe there's still hope for us too. What will you do with this story? Will you scroll past, or will you be part of something bigger? Steve Carter found himself by accident, but thousands of families are still searching on purpose. We are the voice for the voiceless. We are the ones who keep these stories alive. If this story moved you, if you felt even a fraction of what Mark Barnes felt searching those Hawaiian beaches, what Jennifer felt fighting for 10 years to reopen this case, what Steve felt staring at his own missing child photo, then you have a choice. You can scroll past, or you can be part of the solution. Subscribe, because every subscriber helps us amplify these stories. Ring that notification bell, because timing matters in missing person cases. And share this video, because somewhere out there, someone needs to see that miracles still happen. This is why we do this work. This is why every share, every like, every comment matters. The true crime community isn't just about entertainment, we're about justice, hope, and bringing families home. We are not just viewers, we are advocates. Will you join us? Steve Carter's story is one in a million, but it's not the only one. Next week, we're covering another impossible reunion that will restore your faith in happy endings. Because in the true crime community, we believe every family deserves their miracle.